Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you a review of Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera. So Adam Silvera is an author who is best known actually for his YA contemporary books. This is his very first fantasy book, and while I've not actually read any of his other books because YA contemporary tends to not really be my genre of choice, I have heard really good things about his writing and I've been very much looking forward to reading this book. So I ended up really enjoying this, but it does have some ups and downs. It is not a perfect book by any means, but it is a really, really fun read. Before we get into the review, I just really quickly wanted to say that I was given a copy of this book early in exchange for an honest review from Simon & Schuster, so a huge shout out to them for sending me this. However, that does not impact my opinion on this book whatsoever. Also, this is a spoiler-free review. So Infinity Sun is, as I say, a book that I was really, really interested in, and one of the reasons for that is because I actually thought this was going to be like a high fantasy book. This is where my habit of not really reading the synopses of books could have come to bite me in the ass, because this is actually an urban fantasy book. It's not an epic fantasy. It's very much set in kind of a version of our own world. There are things like Snapchat and YouTube, and social media actually plays a really important role in this book. And I actually don't usually like urban fantasy. I've tried it a few times, there's just something about it that I don't enjoy. However, I did end up enjoying this book, and I'm really glad that I didn't see that, or else I might not have given it a try. Infinity Sun follows two main characters, Brighton and Emil, and they are twin brothers who live in New York City. And their version of New York City looks very similar to our own. However, in this particular world, people have magic powers. Well, some people have magic powers. People called Celestials sort of manifest their powers naturally on their 18th birthday or when they turn 18. And we also have people who steal powers from mythical creatures, because there are creatures like phoenixes and hydras in this book. So we have our two brothers, and when the book opens, they are on the verge of their 18th birthday. I wonder what could possibly happen. So one of them manifests powers, the other one does not, and they end up getting caught in this kind of conflict that is way bigger than they ever could have imagined. So I am going to have to start with actually the biggest weakness of this book, which is not something I usually like to do. I like to start things a little bit more positively. However, I do think it's kind of inescapable. The world building in this book is not particularly strong. I think he had a lot of really good ideas. However, I don't think that they were necessarily implemented in the best way. He has so much going on. There is so much going on, and actually I think it would be a little bit difficult to maybe read this book on a Kindle, because I kept finding myself flipping back to previous pages to figure out who was aligned with what faction belonged to, you know, what type of magical person. Different powers manifest with different types of people, and it was just very confusing. I am still not entirely sure what was going on in parts of this book because of that. So we have our Celestials, who are people who manifest powers naturally, and they have certain kinds of powers. So say, I don't think this is necessarily in the book, but like say the power of flight comes only from Celestials. Then you have specters. Specters are people who steal magic powers from mythical creatures. They have different kinds of powers. Say, you know, throwing fire with your hands. Only a specter type of power, and you kind of like have to figure out who's a specter, who's a celestial, and all that kind of thing. Within that, we have the Spellwalkers, who are a faction of Celestials, who are meant to be good guys, and they were kind of revered, and now they're bad guys, but maybe they're good guys, but I don't really know what's going on. And then we have the, what are they? The Bloodcast. The Bloodcast are the specter sort of faction. This gets really confusing. I can't even keep it straight, and I read this fairly recently. So it was really shaky. I think that there were maybe better ways of implementing this. I think that it was definitely worth a little bit more work. Maybe it would have been helpful to have, like, I don't know, a glossary or something, because there's not one in the proof copy. There might be one in the finished copy, but I don't know what would have helped. But it was really, really shaky. I found a lot of it just very, very confusing, unfortunately. And I do think that sometimes that can happen when an author is setting a book in a modern seeming setting, even though there is fantasy elements, because I think that sometimes you can lean a little bit on the fact that people will be familiar with what you're writing, because in theory we should be able to recognize it because it's a modern setting. And I think that maybe some of that happened here, which is really, really unfortunate. Otherwise, I found the inclusion of powers really interesting. It very much has a flair of X-Men to it, and I really liked the fact that there were these mythical creatures, although I wish we saw a lot more of them. They're definitely present, but they're fairly uncommon. Maybe they're quite rare. You just don't really see them, and to me that would be a really big selling point because that's awesome. Moving on to the better parts of this book, the things that I really enjoyed, it was the characters. I really, really enjoyed the characters. We get 4 points of view. I believe it's just 4, but mainly the 2 brothers, Emil and Brighton. We also get the point of view of one of the spellwalkers. I keep wanting to say spell talkers. One of the spellwalkers, and we get the point of view of one of the blood cast. So one of the baddies, one of the maybe goodies, and then our 2 brothers. So it was really interesting to switch back and forth between those perspectives, and I really like the fact that he definitely relied more on the brothers. You see their perspectives much more often than you see the other 2 in the book, and I thought that that actually balanced it really well. I think that maybe 1 or 2 of the perspective chapters probably could have been cut. It probably could have just been Emil and Brighton's point of view. However, I thought the inclusion of a character like Ness, who is a shapeshifter and definitely one of the bad guys, was really interesting. So I'm glad there were more than just those 2 perspectives, but it probably could have been edited down a little bit. Brighton and Emil are amazing characters. And to start with Emil, because I think that he will definitely be a fan favorite, he was wonderful. He is definitely the brother who is maybe a little bit more sensitive. He wants nothing to do with the Celestials. He wants nothing to do with powers. He's really fascinated by phoenixes and he wants to work with phoenixes. He actually, this is one of my favorite just kind of like world building details. He works in the gift shop of basically the equivalent of the Natural History Museum, which is one of my favorite places in New York. I used to go there all the time when I lived there. And that was just so cool. I really enjoyed that. And again, I wish we got a little bit more of that because it's such a lovely detail for his character. One of the other really great things about Emil is that he is openly gay and his sexuality has nothing to do with the conflict of the book. He is out, he is accepted by his family, no one brings it up in a negative way, it has no bearing on like the conflict and the plot. He does get a romance, which is really, really lovely, but it has nothing to do with sort of the struggles that he is going through. And that was really, really nice to see. And I know a lot of, especially YA readers, want to see more of that. So if that's something you're looking for, this book has that and it's done in a really lovely way. Brighton is a little bit more of a difficult character, which of course means that I really enjoyed him. He is, I think, not a very nice person. He's super selfish. He is obsessed with the Celestials, he's obsessed with the Spellwalkers, and he is also obsessed with going viral in social media. He has a YouTube channel, he's all over social media. Basically, he wants to be famous, which I find very insufferable because I've known many people like that in my real life. And I did not like him at first, as I don't think you're necessarily meant to. I understood where he was coming from with a lot of what he was saying, but he really rubbed me the wrong way until we started getting more of the brothers bonding over these crazy events that are surrounding them. And I always say that I love books that have really strong either female friendships or sister relationships. I don't think I've read a book that has a really strong brother relationship. And that's not really something I've sought out because I don't have a brother, I have a sister, so like I want to read books about sisters. So it was really nice and really refreshing to see this sibling relationship between these 2 brothers and the way that they are bonding and the way that they support each other. Because one of the ways in which Brighton really won me over is his just completely unconditional love of his brother and how far he wants to go to protect him. And it was just really great to see. Infinity Sun is a book that I really enjoyed. It very much feels like the equivalent of, say, a big summer blockbuster, but on paper instead of, at the cinema. It was super fast paced. It was such a page turner. I basically read it in one sitting and I could not put it down. Despite the problems that it does have, I think that if you were looking for a really fun urban fantasy book, if you're looking for a really fun book that has a gay male protagonist in it, or if you are looking for a book that does feature a gay male protagonist that does not have his sexuality kind of called into question or be kind of oppressive to him, this is definitely a book you should check out. I have so little experience with urban fantasy, so I can't really say if you like this, you'll like this. However, at the very beginning of this copy, and I hope it's something that they keep in the finished copy, there is a really lovely letter to the reader from Adam Silvera talking about how he loves fantasy, he loves X-Men, he loves all of this stuff, but he never really saw himself in any of these fantasy stories growing up as a young gay man. And the very first time that he saw a gay character that he could relate to was in Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter books, which are books I have not read. So if you are a fan of Cassandra Clare's books, I have a sneaking suspicion you are very much going to enjoy this one. Infinity Sun is a book that really feels like it comes from the heart, and I think that that was one of the reasons why I ended up really enjoying this book. So as I say, despite the problems, I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. It's just, as my mother would say, a thumping good read. That is it for my review of Infinity Sun. You can go ahead and pick this up in the UK on the 14th of January 2020, and it comes from Simon & Schuster Kids. I would love to know in the comments below if you plan on reading this, if you were fortunate enough to receive an early copy and you have already read it. Let me know your thoughts. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.